We are sending our greetings of peace and our prayers for good health and safety of everyone from Iloilo, Philippines and Taiwan. I am pretty sure that with our current experience because of the pandemic and with our limited situations, we somehow entertain the question, is there still a window for us to get back to the usual way of things? Good morning, everyone. I am Jesse Labiste Jr., and together with my colleague, Donny Jones Sudusta, and the rest of our team, Early Solgado and Johnny V. Amparo, we are presenting to you our insights and our lessons learned from our ongoing conversations on the pedagogy of the new normal here in Iloilo, Philippines. Almost everyone was caught off guard when the enhanced community lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic was put in place in March 2020, first in the nation's capital and in the rest of the country. The experience of the lockdown or the enhanced community quarantine and the general health, safety, and welfare concerns that emerged have opened or perhaps reopened a number of key issues. With the increasing number of confirmed cases here in the Philippines alone, it is very much evident that the crisis did not only shake our country's healthcare system, but also revealed to the public the gaps in our economic, political, and social institutions. The education system is no exemption. Reflecting on the effects of the global COVID-19 pandemic in our educational institution, there is no doubt that the demand for viable solutions and the need to provide inclusive dialogues and authentic conversations can forge a collective wisdom to addressing these issues. Around 861.7 million students across the globe were out of school last March. But this number is nothing compared to our teachers and school leaders who are caught in a dilemma on how educational institutions will function in the time of pandemic. The staggering impact on global education requires a way of reconfiguring the educational framework and policies that will require us to see the old approaches in the current curricular content. Thus, many of our students ask this question: should schools expect us to come back and resume our studies as if nothing overwhelming happened to us? Are we expected to settle back to the old normal? As a research and public service university, the University of the Philippines is obliged to respond to the most severe global pandemic there is. We, however, must also look beyond just providing immediate relief. We must start thinking, talking, planning, and working our ways forward. Thus, our team has decided to initiate conversation to help us move forward and fulfill the mission of our institution, the Division of Professional Education of the College of Arts and Sciences of UP Visayas. That is, to set the pace and standards for teacher education in the region. Through a series of interactive webinars, these conversations aim to co-evolve a framework for the pedagogy of the new normal, not only for the university but also for its publics, the other educational institutions in the region and beyond. These interactive webinar series allowed our participants to reflect, articulate, and explore the current or emerging educational assumptions, approaches, and assessment schemes that have come into given the experiences and lessons before and during the pandemic. Since April, we conducted a total of 9 sessions to some 427 participants, a mix of school teachers, school administrators, graduate and high school students, and even those working in the industry and the media. Each session lasts for 2 hours, with breaks, games, open forum, and breakout sessions in between. These participants attended our Zoom sessions, where they were asked to join in answering our interactive questions using various platforms like Slido and Kahoot. After a brief talk on the proposed analytical framework, participants then asked to fill in the template that aims to generate ideas in further developing the tentative framework. This was done by forming breakout groups. Facilitated by one of our team members, each group organizes their breakout groups to re examine the proposed analytical framework. Drawing from principles and concepts in psychological, philosophical, and sociocultural foundations of education, and as well as current and emerging trends in instructional systems designs, we generated an initial tentative analytical framework that cascades from the level of educational and pedagogical assumptions to that of approaches and assessment. Each participant were then asked to fill the old normal, new normal matrix to provide us an understanding how the participants view the analytical framework considering their experience in the old normal and what they expect in the new normal. The participants also articulated what needs to be started, stopped, continued, or changed, putting into consideration the context of this pandemic. I now give you Donnie, who will share with you what we have gleaned from these conversations.
Good morning, everyone. 大家好. My name is Donnie. Thank you to one of our team members, Jesse, for providing the overview and operations of our webinar workshop series. Please allow me to walk you through some of the insights that we have gathered, negotiated, and put together from this collective experience of engaging and being in dialogue with our fellow teachers in our locality, which, by the way, is still an ongoing affair. After collecting and organizing the audio-video data and the filled-up activity sheets from the webinar series, they were reviewed and subjected to coding and thematic analysis. This was an iterative process of going back and forth to our data and tempered with our own field notes, which were shaped into the subcomponents of the evolving framework. What we wanted to present in this paper are not the results of the thematic analysis. That would be for another paper. Rather, informed with the clues from the thematic analysis, we wanted to present how these series of engagements and dialogues with the teachers in our locality, in the insights they have shared, in addition to our own critical reflections as immersive facilitators, were able to help us in evolving our initial framework on how we could talk about the shifts from the old to the new normal. Overall, while the participants have expressed their agreement with the proposed changes in the assumptions, approaches, and assessments given the context of the pandemic, they also believe that these changes are long overdue. They have been exposed to these new directions and approaches and strategies in the previous in-service trainings, but a lot of these hardly came to be. For the first session out of the 3 parts of our webinar series, our team's initial intention was to present the overall framework, but focus mainly on the assumption segment. However, during the entire course of our discussions, the teachers' sharing have meandered across all the 3 major components. This supports the notion that these components are interlinked and not fundamentally independent of each other. The local teachers in the field are aware of the impending surge of demands from them because of the pandemic. Their concerns are often on the pragmatic aspects of their work, how to plan and implement new approaches, how to go about the new or alternative means of assessments. All these need to consider the context of a dramatically changing educational landscape. One big elephant in the room, so to speak, was not the capacity of the teachers to teach, nor the capacity of the learners to learn. It is the insistence on achieving the goals and targets of the old normal, while the contexts and the people have already undergone dramatic changes. While the teachers are gradually coming into grips with the unfolding context and challenges, they have some doubts on whether some of their educational leaders, who have been mostly test-centric on their logic and procedures, are seeing the need for a different target and interpreting the unfolding contexts and challenges as they, the teachers in the field, see them at a local grassroots level. These are the initial 3 main components and their respective subcomponents of the proposed framework. We use this as a launchpad for our discussions with the webinar participants to compare and contrast the conditions of the old and the new normal. We are grateful to our participants for the wonderful and eureka insights that they have shared during the webinar series. For the assumptions, we could surmise that the way towards the new normal is to embrace learner, teacher, and school autonomy, take on a growth mindset, and sustain fruitful collaborations, especially across other content areas and even schools in the locality. For approaches, an authentic learner-centered design of learning is a long overdue goal because despite the claims during the old normal that it is a learner-centered system, much of the actual practice shows otherwise. As for assessment, there was an agreement that we should put less emphasis on assessment of learning and give more premium to assessment for learning and assessment as learning to foster effective learning designs and learners' self-regulation and critical self-evaluation, which are more needed to respond to the changing context of the educational landscape. After all, this is a world where a test score does not always mean competence. At the onset of the webinar series, we invited our participants to consider the three major components of the framework as a means on how we could talk about the shift from the old to the new normal. Suggestions for changes and modifications in the framework were not very explicit at first, and we had to rely on our collective and previous experience of in-service teacher trainings, community immersions in various grassroots initiatives and communities, and research experiences at the local front to draw them out. We knew that there were a lot of things that could be collected from what is not said, aside from what is said. Reading and rereading the data after several rounds of developing tentative categories and transposing them back into the data reveals new angles and insights. So after several revisions, back and forth iterative revisiting and rereading of the data, we have arrived at the following evolutions of the framework. One version featured new additional subcomponents for assumptions, approaches, and assessment. The subcomponents increased and decreased along the way. While we consider the new responses, we also take stock of the previous ones. As we were implementing the last half of the 9 sessions, the framework started to become what it is now. Some components were retained, others were added. For now, when we talk about what would be education and pedagogy in the new normal, our discussions are guided by this framework. As public service providers for various schools and other learning institutions in our locality, we would like to believe that this evolving model is something that is shaped from the local experience and as a flexible guide towards achieving local aspirations. Our team recommends more conversations, more local initiatives, and more local knowledge building. And these initiatives must take in new directions and benchmark and explore through the grassroots and through the leadership levels several more conversations and points where we could move from the old normal to the new normal. On behalf of our public service team, with Jonavi, Early Sol, Jesse, and me, Donnie, we would like to thank you for joining us today. So we say, Madamo gid nga salamat. Thank you very much. Padayon. Let's keep moving forward. We leave you with the email address of our corresponding author and team leader, Early Sol, should you have any questions or concerns which we could not answer during the Q&A. We hope that you could start your own local conversations, come up with local solutions, and produce local knowledge. And we are looking forward to learn from your experience of local conversations, local stories, and local experiences. Again, thank you very much and good day.